Must be 6 o'clock. The school's calling.
What do you want? Bike ride? Oh, all right. All right. We'd like to get started. Appreciate everyone that's here for our city council and all those who are watching it in TV land. I've asked Jeremy Lewis to give us our prayer. Come on over, whatever else you'd like to say.
Stand.
You just face us, because we're the good-looking ones.
You're the good-looking?
You don't want to look back there.
Okay.
It's kind of scary.
They may have something to say about that. I'll offer a word of prayer.
Thank you.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful at this time to be able to be here, and we're thankful for the rain that's on its way right now. We're thankful for the many blessings that we've been given. We're grateful for a system of democracy and the opportunity we have to be able to be a part of this great community, Spanish Fork. We're thankful for our health and our strength and the many blessings that we have and the many resources that we have. We're grateful for all of our friends and family members, and we ask a blessing that thou wouldst be with us at this time, and we do so humbly in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. I've asked Councilman Mendenhall to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please stand and repeat the pledge after me.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Public Works Division of the Year, Street, Storm, and Water. You gonna be the spokesman here? Bring him on down.
We have the Streets and Stormwater Division come out.
Oh, God. There's a motley looking crew.
But they're a hard-working crew.
This is
Run around, move around. You can all. Yeah, we want to get all your pretty faces on TV. Yeah, you know who you are.
this is a great division of Public Works. The Streets and Stormwater Division, just really good, hardworking individuals that accomplish things that seem to not be accomplishable, if that's a word, in any other city. And I just really admire them and look up to them, and appreciate working with them. And they've let me work with them, and they're very kind to me, even though my skills are not even close to what theirs are. Eventually, I always ended up on the rake.
Well, I wondered where all
Raking
those
out the
cold
asphalt,
seams,
but
guys.
I was just stressing that I was doing that right. But that being said, really have a great division here, and they won the coveted Division of the Year award for Public Works. This award is given to the division that has accomplished the most. And it's not necessarily in that year, but maybe what they accomplished culminated in that year. Now, there's 7 divisions in Public Works. You have the airport, you have the wastewater treatment plant and wastewater collections, you have pressurized irrigation and drinking water, you have fleet and garbage services, you have engineering, you have electric, and you have
Power and light instead of electric.
power and light. Yeah, that's a good point. Power and light, and you have the Streets and Stormwater Division, and so to be the best division out of all those divisions is quite an accomplishment. Anyway, the reason why they won the Division of the Year award is it says this: in recognition of your outstanding achievement and exceptional efforts in providing needed maintenance to all city streets in an 8-year period. Basically, all the streets as of last year, now we're building more all the time, but as of that point in time have been touched in some way. And the way that they accomplish this is by some very innovative methods that at the time they started weren't being done in any other city that I knew of in Utah. It's called the best first philosophy. It means they take their really good roads and they keep them good. And then they go to their not bad roads, and then they bring them up to a level of good, and then they keep them good. And they just keep this group of good roads good, and they continue to reach out and bring not as good roads up to that level and then keep them at that level. When you do that, the return on your money for keeping a good road good is $6 to $10 for every dollar you spend. So for those bankers in the group to get a 600 to 1,000% return on your money, you know that good things are going to happen. And that's what happened is they started taking all their good roads and keeping them good by sealing them. Then that return started to pay off towards the end when they had most all the roads good and they could dedicate all of their money to overlaying. And Jamie, you did 5.5 million square feet of overlay.
We did 5.5 million so far this year.
So at any rate, we were able to, on that method, we were able to get all of the roads covered in an 8-year period, which is a great accomplishment. Most cities, and this is a little bit of a credit to our elected officials, most cities cannot do this for political reasons. They go in and they seal up a brand new road, and the citizen over on the next block who has a really bad road complains and says, why are they sealing up my brother-in-law's road, which is really great, when my road needs all the attention? But because of that, they just focus on the bad roads, and they use up all of their budget, and then the good roads, because of inattention, eventually become expensive bad roads, and they don't benefit from that 600 to 1,000% return. And so I know at the beginning we got a lot of complaints, and the city council had to hear that, and Jamie and I spent a lot of time on the phone talking to people who were complaining because their bad roads weren't getting the attention they wanted, but we weathered through it, and it's really paid off. But there's some other things that was done, and that was we started paving our own roads. And we bought a paver. The reason why we bought the paver was we were just going to do leveling courses. It seemed like leveling courses were eating up all our budget, and we were frustrated we couldn't do as much overlay. So all we bought the paver for is to do leveling courses. We were going to do our crack seal ourselves, because crack seal is really hard to quantify, and you never know if you're getting a good price. So if we did our crack seals and our leveling courses on our own, then we could just bid out standard 2-inch overlays and do a bunch. And so we did that, and we got pretty good at those leveling courses. And I remember one summer I had just been called out to 2 different subdivisions where a very poor job was done by the private sector on some overlays, and it was really frustrating. And Jamie called me. I remember he said, hey, my crews really wanted to do an overlay, so I just let them. And they did a couple blocks. It was north of Larson Elementary. Do you remember that? They did 2 streets. I think it was 2 blocks each street, so 4 blocks. They did those 2. And I remember driving up from the 2 subdivisions that I just looked at that had just horrible overlays. And I parked just north of Larson. I remember walking down those 2 blocks and just seeing the most beautiful job of an overlay. And Jamie's like, I think I can save a lot of money if we do our own overlays. And from then, we were able to do an incredible job. And it seems like we get calls all the time from other cities asking us to train them and show them how we're doing it. And they'll come down and over and over again. And we would show them, and then they would go and they'd buy pavers and try to set these things up, and it wouldn't work. And the more I think about that, the more I think it's a credit to these guys, because they can do things that perhaps a normal city crew couldn't do, and doing some overlays and some other things. And so what a credit to them that they can have such a good overlay crew and crack seal and all the things that they do. I just really appreciate them. Now, it's funny, I was just up in Salt Lake at a conference, and Jamie was again giving a presentation on how we do it in Spanish Fork. He's pretty sought after for all this, and I think that's a credit to him and all the guys that work with him. And so here is the plaque for Jamie Chappell, division manager, and I'll let him hand out the ones to his guys here.
I'm gonna have to get the cheaters on though.
You're not that old.
I think he wanted to say a few words first, though.
Yeah.
The one thing that I did want to say is I do want to thank you guys. It seems like whenever we've needed anything, you guys have given us the chance to get it and prove ourselves. I got a great crew. I got an awesome crew. I'll put my crew up against anybody. Without my crew, these things are not accomplishable. So I'd like to thank you guys and my crew for the job that you guys do. I appreciate it. We'll hand them now. Dave Pay. Thank you, sir. Shake Chris's hand. He's already left us. Oh, we had one, Wyatt O'Brien, that was a good asset to us last year. He got still an offer, so he's got, but I'll make sure that he gets it.
You get it. Okay.
Gentry Mitchell. Thank you, sir. Ed Roberts. Ed's one of my foremen. He's one of my right-hand men.
You have to right now.
I do.
I can attest to that.
Hayden Nelson. Butch, as we like to call him. Jay Jensen. Thanks, Jay.
Yes, Jay.
Louis Charlene. Thank you, Screwy. We call him Screwy Louis. Kyle Fawcett. This is how fast I run them off, too.
Yeah. I can believe that too.
Chase them off. Thank you, Twist. Ray Hawkins. He's the other one of my right hands. Brandon Johnson. Brandon's been taking care of our storm drains and doing a bang-up job. Blake Clayson, part of our asphalt team.
All right.
All of them?
Now, we have one more that was just hired, and we'll get them a plaque.
Yes. Wyatt Goforth, we just hired, and we will get him a plaque. You was working part-time for us last year, right? Okay. So Wyatt Goforth is one of our newest hires. He's been with us for 8 months, full-time. Probably a year and a half when you take in his part-time work that he did before we hired him on. So, all right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, we want to take all your hands.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Again, I won't run over you, I promise. Cheers.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Louis.
Thank you.
Twist.
Thank you, sir.
Butch.
Jay, thanks. Welcome, Mr. Goforth.
Thank you. You made it.
Good job.
You did it.
Hey, thanks, Peter.
I know it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
They made a believer out of me.
Oh, I'll tell you. I'll tell you what, we owe a lot to these guys. I can remember Jamie coming to me, he said, yeah, we need some equipment. I said, if you get us some equipment, we can do it. So he did it. And I've been in a lot of meetings with different mayors throughout the state, up in Salt Lake, and one particular, and the one mayor said, yeah, we're on our way to Spanish Fork next week to meet with Jamie Chappell. He's going to teach us how to do this right. And I said, well, he'll teach you right. So, yeah, they've done well. And they've saved the city a lot of money, so we're appreciative of them. Okay, and that cleaned out the room pretty much, so that was good. Okay, public comments. Anyone here from the public would like to address the council? Seeing none, we will go to council comments. Councilman Argyle.
I don't have anything at this time, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Gordon.
Mayor,
That would be me.
and everybody else listening. Our chamber representative, Heather Youd, she's from Elk Ridge, so she is asked to be dismissed tonight. As you can imagine, she's been filling sandbags, and so she called me today and said, hey, and I said, well, you are certainly excused for that activity. So our thoughts are with her and her neighbors at this time. But some of the things I wanted to highlight that the Chamber's got going on is our Business of the Month for October is Mountain Country Foods. Mountain Country Foods, of course, is a great community partner and member of the Chamber. And so when a time comes that works for them, we will highlight them as our Business of the Month for October. Trick-or-treating is Saturday, October 27th on Main Street from 4th North to Center Street. It's on that Saturday from 1 to 3, and so it's pretty much as soon as the farmers market ends, we'll start our trick-or-treating. So, and again, mentioning the farmers market, we have one more month of that. So I invite you to continue to come down and buy fresh vegetables and local produce from our local growers. As far as garbage is concerned, we are continuing to research the ground that's in Springville and the potential purchase ground in Spanish Fork and doing our due diligence process to find out costs of potentially relocating in Spanish Fork and or rebuilding on the site of Springville, and we'll be able to make a good decision that way. And then the only last thing I wanted to touch on, Mayor, was the RAP tax. Please get informed. Please understand what it is you're voting yes or no for, and Proposition 7, and what it is. What it is, it's that 1 penny on $10 spent, and an opportunity to collect a tax from a lot of people that shop inside our town that are not from our town. So I just encourage people to know what's on the ballot here coming out, as mail ballots will be coming out here pretty quick. And that's all I have, Mayor.
All right. Councilman Scopes.
Mayor, just a couple of things. Ironically, with the streets crews, when I went out to D.C. week before last, our last meeting, picked up a co-worker who grew up in Spanish Fork, and his parents still live here. He actually commented on the roads, because where he lives in the northern part of Utah County, I won't mention the city, it's a good thing I picked him up in my truck. Honest to goodness, it was really, really bad. And you kind of take for granted how nice our roads are. You don't think of it, but he mentioned that. He said, oh yeah, no, when I go see Mom and Dad, boy, their roads down there are so nice. And it was in front of his house. I didn't have to put it in four-wheel drive, but I'm glad I had a truck. So a couple of things. The Fine Arts Committee, I didn't make it back in town, but they are working on getting the metrics and numbers from the Harvest Moon Hurrah. Appreciate all the volunteers that participated in that. It was a great event. As I was told, neighbors and ward members were able to attend and really enjoyed that. This week will be a busy week. The Utah Lake Commission, I have that meeting on Thursday morning at 7:30. Veterans Council meeting will be tomorrow evening at 6. And then the animal shelter, that meeting will be in the next week or two as well. So I will have more to report on those meetings. One shout out to the animal shelter. They've had an increase in rescues as you would anticipate with the fires up at Elk Ridge and Woodland Hills. The city of Spanish Fork, our facilities and things have been, in a service support role to be able to help our sister communities, and that goes out or extends out even into other infrastructure and other services. The animal shelter had made room for animals that were rescued. They've had a big uptick in that, and so it's really nice to see. And the Lieutenant Governor has made mention through social media and other media outlets of just how much this part of the valley really comes together as a tremendous place to live, tremendous place to settle down, and hopefully for those watching, a tremendous place to come and continue to do business with Spanish Fork. So thank you so much. That's all I have.
Great, thank you. Councilman Mendenhall.
Thank you, Mayor. I was told that since I missed last time, I get double time.
It was such
Chad-
a nice, quick.
Chad yielded his time.
Chad yielded his time, yeah.
No, he didn't.
Oh, he did not? Okay, he took it back.
No.
I'll hurry. Piggyback on what Councilman Gordon said real quick about the RAP tax. There's going to be a lot of propositions, obviously, if we're number 7 on that ballot, that there's going to be a lot of studying that voters need to do. I guess my plea and statement on that is your ballots do get mailed out. Next time we meet 2 weeks from today is October 16th is when I think that ballots arrive at our homes. And so you do have from that time that your ballots at your home to Election Day in November to really study the issues and come up with what fits you and your family. And again, I would implore you to make sure you do your research on the RAP tax, on Proposition 7. There's a whole lot of good attributes to it that could really help our community and help the arts, parks, and recreation sections of our quality of life. The Utah League of Cities and Towns Conference was held a couple weeks ago that we attended. We've installed a new board for the league and increased the board size from 16 members of that board to 22 to help represent all 248 cities within the state of Utah. So it's going to be a good year in discussing the issues that we all share about and sharing best practices. So I'm excited for that year coming up again with the league. The active and healthy movement is still moving along. The Fit City Initiative. Dave Anderson and I think somebody's got a couple of pictures that I sent to Angie, were able to carpool and hang out with each other for a day last week up in Salt Lake at the Little America Hotel and attend the Move Utah Summit. Move Utah is a division of the Utah Department of Transportation, and basically it was an all-day conference of sharing best practices about communities that are trying to plan active transportation inside their city. I'm there on a forum there, Mayor. I told a really good joke. Dave took the picture. He didn't get everybody laughing. I don't know what was the deal. You were a little bit late, Dave.
All about timing.
It was a good.
Yeah, we'll take your word for it.
It was a really good joke. I don't remember it, but we had a good day talking with people and also sharing what we've done so far in Spanish Fork. Credit Dave and his department in the city as a whole. Dale and his department, Parks and Rec, for getting together and trying to plan routes in our city of where we can get from point A to point B and do it safely. Trails were discussed a whole lot in that conference. But I'm really excited about the next phases of our trail that get people from our communities, from our neighborhoods, down to the river trail instead of all of us having to take a car there to do it. So really exciting stuff, and people commented that there's a few spots that we are leading the way, and a few things we learned too that we can build on as well. So to piggyback on the active and healthy movement as well, our sole attendee in council meeting tonight, sorry Craig to do this to you, but Craig Baker has joined us tonight, and maybe I'll give you 60 seconds if you'd like, Craig, to come up and tell us who you are. Basically, what Craig is the wing of the software wing of being able to connect a doctor that we've been in contact with from the city that we hope to sign a contract with soon, that is a doctor of mental health. Not psychology, what would you call it? Is it? Okay. Please, come up. The gist of it, Mayor, is that the city is looking at engaging a doctor through Craig's services, that someone would be able to log on and discuss maybe their mental health issues with a doctor, and do that at no cost to them, but at a cost to the city through our Active and Healthy grant, and then determine from that quick visit, if more needs to be done, if they need to be referred, right?
Right, that's exactly right. The idea is that we call it a My Friends, and basically have an app where someone from Spanish Fork can get online, be vetted, making sure that they're from Spanish Fork, just like you'd go through a TSA. You got a driver's license, maybe a water bill or something, and that's vetted online. But the opportunity is that to take someone, I always configure, you think of your hand, someone can call, and there's a therapist. And the therapist is there to help an individual who's in crisis or whatever. But the service is more than just doing therapeutic, taking someone and working with them from the emotional standpoint. But what we want to do is we want to utilize already nonprofit or agencies that are already in place. And that's really the guiding portion of that, is to handle someone initially with their situation. But we as therapists actually act as kind of a concierge service. My Friends, we help them get in touch with already resources. There's already wonderful resources. Spanish, you probably have resources already. And the whole idea is to be most effective, to take these people from a crisis situation, to put them in touch with those other state, federal, or local nonprofits or public agencies, and guide them to them. And eventually put them in a situation where, whether it's with their own insurance or other situations, because you have a limited budget. The idea, though, is to put that together. It's all done. My partner, Sheldon Martin, is probably one of the top individuals in the country on teletherapy. And that's the idea, is to give them that accessibility. But the real thing is to put people in touch with. If you can imagine, someone calls, they're in crisis, the therapist handles that, they stay with them, but they might touch base with someone in their ward. I mean, I came here today, I'm from Monterey, California, but I'm here, I'm doing some work in Heber. The idea that there are people out there that would minister to them, other agencies. And the idea is to not take all that money, but to use that as a starter for those people that are in crisis or in needs, and then to utilize and take an opportunity for them to just minister to them. I use that word by using that. And I think it's a wonderful program. And the idea isn't to take that, but to find a way to sustain that. And one of those arms is whether it's getting them on insurance, whatever that, or work with other nonprofits. And that's the idea. And the idea is you don't want to just go to a therapist. The therapist has to be more than that. That money that you have is sacred. We want to make sure it's used wisely, but put those in a situation of self-sustaining. So the concept is My Friends. We've got things, and I'm going to speak with Mike more about that, but that's the idea in a nutshell. And I think it's very innovative. And I think that application can be used, you'll be a model because that application can be used in a lot of other municipalities or even organizations. So that's the concept. I didn't mean to take too much time. I apologize.
That's all right.
Nope.
We'll forgive you.
Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
That's exactly what we were looking for. Be a pretty neat program if we can get it to come together and offer something to our citizens that's part of the mental health aspect that we're finding out in our active and healthy movement is the stigma of it and the accessibility for people to get that help. And so this could go a long way in helping with that. One more thing I'd like to mention, piggybacking on what Keir said, it reminded me of, I'm sure there's been a lot said in last council meeting and leading up to this meeting about just how awesome our community and our surrounding communities have been during this tragedy. My mom called me this afternoon. They live in the pre-evacuation area of Spanish Fork that's now been lifted, but they had some folks, some members of their ward that were still in the evacuation area that had been staying with them. And kind of funny, my mom talking to me about that, and people staying in your basement that are guests for a while and dealing, and just making sure you're trying to be respectful of people and everything else. But today, when that evacuation order gets lifted and those people go home, my mom cries, cries her heart out, and probably from feeling, I told her, the emotions of some people that were with you, and that you get to know a lot better because they're under your roof. But then I think the emotions of people really doing good and a power higher than us, letting those people know that you have done good and you've truly helped your neighbor. And I know there's a million of those stories throughout this tragedy, and that's just one. But thank you to every one of you, every person that extended a hand that most lately has filled sandbags. But if you took goods to any of the places and helped anybody out, wow, what you did for our community can really be lasting for years. So from me, thank you so much for that help. That's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you. And just going off that, Spanish Fork has kind of been ground zero for all the coordination for the firefighters and everyone else. And so if you go down to the fairgrounds 2.5 weeks ago, it was pretty awesome with all the firefighters here. And we had over 2,000 firefighters here. We're down to 600. And after the next couple of days, we might be down to none of them if that rain keeps coming. But which I want to talk about is the governor's come down. I met with him yesterday, and he has declared a state of emergency for those areas around Elk Ridge, Woodland Hills, and Covered Bridge for the anticipation of the flood that's going to come. That we get enough rain here with all the burn scars. So if you see a lot of National Guard trucks and equipment, that's why they're here, and they're here to help. And so last 2.5 weeks here, 3 weeks, I've been in a lot of meetings with the firefighters along with all our staff here, giving our support, especially to Woodland Hills and Elk Ridge and Covered Bridge. And so all those mayors and individuals have just came up to me and just said, thank you for all that you've done, Spanish Fork. You've been there when we needed you, and you guys are awesome. So I want to just thank all the citizens and especially the staff that rose to the occasion. I talked to one of the incident commanders from the firefighters. He said, this is unreal. We've never seen it like this, the cooperation and the outpouring of love and help. And so he said, we won't forget Spanish Fork. And so it's pretty good. Okay, let's move on to Spanish Fork 101. Oh, before I do that, I'd like to excuse Council Member Beck. She is on a plane heading to Boston, so hope she has a great time back there. So, and we want to excuse her. So, 101, Accessory Apartments.
Yeah, Mayor, if you don't mind, we'll just do a quick wrap tax first.
Okay, let's
and then
do
we'll jump
wrap
into
tax
the ADUs.
Didn't know which order you wanted.
No, sorry. Thank you. Just to second what Council Members Gordon and Mendenhall mentioned, in about 2 weeks, ballots will be mailed out to registered voters in Spanish Fork. If you're not currently registered to vote, you can go to vote.utah.gov to register, or you can go to the Utah County office and register there as well. Those ballots will be mailed as well. In the next 2 weeks, about a week and a half, we will have voter information pamphlets, which will be mailed to every household in Spanish Fork, which has some very detailed information about Proposition 7, what it means for the residents and what it means for the city. Likewise, we have our website, SpanishFork.org/RapTax, and we've talked a lot about this in the past with a lot of good information, some videos that we've made that explain, components of the rap tax, and we've added this section down at the bottom. We've received a lot of really good and thoughtful questions from our residents, and so to better explain those for them, we've added this FAQ section, which addresses some of those questions that we've been asked. We encourage residents to visit our website to learn more about the rap tax, read the voter information pamphlet, which will be delivered to your home, call the city if you have any other questions, and then the next city council meeting on October 16th, we will have a public meeting about the rap tax, and we'll have a formal presentation that will outline a lot of the information. And so we encourage residents to come and participate in that, either here in person or watch that from home, to learn more as you prepare for the election this November. Thank you.
Scott, one quick one, just that, the fifth one down there, important one. Can you answer that question really quick while you have it up on the screen? Because there's a decimal problem with that question, right?
This one. Right, yeah. So we've had a couple individuals that have asked, hey, so if I go buy a vehicle, how much will I pay in rap tax? And it's just a mathematical equation that I think gets a little confused, because the rate for the rap tax is 0.1%. So if you convert that percentage to a decimal, then you have to move it over 2 times. And so if you're doing the math at home, don't do 40,000 times 0.1, because you'll be timesing it by 10%, and that's definitely not what the rap tax rate is going to be. So move that decimal over twice and do 40,000 times 0.001 to get the correct equation on that.
Thank you. Sorry.
No. Just good to have you back.
Chris called me the banker, and it's because of decimals.
All right, perfect.
That's
all right.
all it takes to be a banker?
Yeah, there's not.
You have to get a calculator.
Okay.
You have to come to work at 10 and leave at 3.
You have to be available from 10 to 3.
Yeah.
I might not be able to do that.
So I had three brothers that were bankers, so there you go.
Play golf.
All right, sorry. Go ahead, Dave, take it away.
Mayor, Council, thank you. I'd really like to have this be a little bit of a discussion rather than just you hearing from me for the next hour. And maybe to start with,
Let's
if any
see,
of you
he's
heard
on the
anything,
clock. He's on
maybe read anything, maybe lately about some kind of a housing shortage or housing crisis here in our part of the world. And we're not certainly alone. Other parts of the country, maybe you're in more of an acute situation even than we are here. But certainly today, the question of everything from housing affordability to housing availability seems to be on everybody's minds here along the Wasatch Front. And it's a situation that currently has an impact on our local economy. Likely into the future will have a greater impact on our economy. It certainly has an impact on quality of life. It has an impact on simply people's ability to earn a living. And for lots and lots of different reasons, I really feel like increasingly we that are involved in local government in different ways really have kind of a call to action today to do different things, to try to, in some way, shape, or form, provide some relief to this situation that we're in right now. And I think it's helpful to understand what I believe, and I've heard this from a few people, maybe in a little different kind of phraseology, but I think it's important to understand what the real nature of our current problem is. And to state the obvious, today demand far outweighs supply relative to what exists in our housing market. And to even go back to something that one of the gentlemen pointed out at the League of Cities and Towns conference, relative to his belief that this is not a situation that we're necessarily going to solve. We're certainly not going to solve it quickly. We are dealing with a housing we are dealing with a housing situation now on the Wasatch Front that has taken a while for us to get into. And for a number of different factors, touch on a couple of them here, we're not going to get out of it anytime soon, and it's likely going to be very much so an ongoing problem for us. We grow at a pretty rapid rate here in Utah, so certainly our internal rate of growth plays a big role in the demand for housing. A couple of the factors that folks that rely on the demand for housing to utilize their product, so thinking about, for example, folks that have really, really big inventories of apartments, groups that have maybe 5,000 and 10,000 apartments, oftentimes publicly traded companies. These are two metrics that they track very, very closely. So they are very, very interested, for example, in how many kids enter kindergarten every year. Why would that be? Anybody want to maybe
My wife.
talk
Job
about
security.
that? So,
Mayor's wife's 5 years old.
first and foremost, mayor's wife's job might be another reason or two as well, but so some of those things, of course. But I mean, think about this: if you have a product that you're going to be marketing 20 and 30 and 40 years from now, and you're trying to guess about what the demand for that product would be, you see the relationship perhaps between that future demand and how many kids enter kindergarten. They're not so much worried about 2018 and 2019 demand as they're making bets on projects that are going to be in their portfolio for a really, really long time. So they look at these numbers here. And I didn't track down specifically kindergartners entering the Utah public school system. Rather, we just looked at overall public school enrollment. And at a minimum, we can see from here that it continues to increase. And we know that is going to continue to be the case. Even though our birth rate in Utah will decline over time, we're seeing that, and we would anticipate that that will continue. Because there are more Utahns, our rate of growth will continue to climb. So there will be more people in Utah year after year after year than there were before. And that rate's only going to increase. And certainly the statistics that we have from school enrollment bear fruit to that point. Same folks that I was talking about, people that are trying to determine what the future demand for housing would be, they're also very concerned about kids that graduate from high school. So that's more their short-term look at what that demand for housing is going to be. And maybe we might say the new demand for housing. We all know it's typically a pretty short period of time, relative to our lifespans after we leave high school to when we're in the housing market. For some of us, it was immediate. For others of us, it might be a year or two down the road. For some of us, it's for products like apartments. For others of us, it might be as potential home buyers. But these two factors, and above all, allowing them to illustrate that we continue to grow from internal growth here in Utah, play a very, very significant role on the demand side of housing. And for tonight, I'm just focusing on this. But of course, we all understand that in addition to our internal growth, which compared with other states is remarkable, we have a very, very high job growth rate. In recent years, several times, it's been the fastest in the country. That leads, in addition to internal growth, to in-migration, which adds to the demand. So we've had that situation that has been consistent. Kids did not stop entering the public school system during the recession. People didn't stop having kids. We continued to grow, but we did, I'm speaking maybe a little bit abstractly here, we stopped building houses. We went from building on average 15,000 new homes on the Wasatch Front every year to building more like 6 or 7. And that is why we have the situation that we have today. Demand and that pace of new demand did not diminish. But on the supply side, we have taken a huge hit, just collectively as a market, and now we're starting to play catch up here. And I say starting to play catch up because we really just got to the point where we're kind of catching up in 2017. And even then, we didn't hit 15,000 new homes built on the Wasatch Front. Still building at a slower pace than we were building in the decade or so prior to the recession. Still, keeping in mind that there are more new Utahns or more Utahns entering the housing market every year now than there even were back here. Just relative to that gap and why we're deficient on the supply side. And I want to mention one other thing, and let me say this as well. Here's my preceding thought. Oftentimes we as local government, we get blamed for either through land use regulations or different fee structures, different things like that, of being a major contributor to the deficiency that we have today. And am I biased? Absolutely. I'll defend our collective actions as municipalities, but I think that's hogwash. I really, really do. Any of the things that we could do, even as a local jurisdiction, to alleviate this problem, they have limits, and certainly we couldn't have played a significant role in getting to this situation. Now, that being said, I think another thing that exacerbates our current situation, and if you can maybe remember back with me to 10, 12, 15 years ago, and I'll just use my own personal experience to kind of describe my thought, I was amazed in my early 30s, let's say, looking at my peers in their late 20s, maybe in early 30s, and looking at building plans that would come through our shop here, and just seeing either the homes that my friends were living in or the homes that people were buying, and other factors, relative to the lifestyles that people were living. But speaking specifically about the housing stock that was being built here, far too little of it were 1,100 square foot, 1.5 bath ramblers, and that has had an effect as well on our ability to kind of recoup and to provide housing that's really commiserate with the need today. And that's something that, frankly, I think in different ways we as local government probably did contribute to, right? And we do, in different ways, set the bar relative to square footage requirements, and we do that for lots of reasons, and frankly, in another setting, I'll justify those kinds of things as well. But the type of supply that was being built here really, I don't think, matched the need as closely as maybe it should have. So all in all, using our numbers, this is kind of the deficiency that was created from 2007, say all the way out to 2017. I think we went to 2013 with this. So one way to look at the deficiency, and I apologize for belaboring this, but this really is the issue, and this is why it's not going to, the discussion's not going to end. It's not going to go away quickly. If we took every new dwelling unit that was built in 2017 and continued at that pace of roughly 15,000 a year, you can do the math. We're almost 4 years out. If we just dedicated all of that new construction to making up for the deficiency that was created during the recession, much less to provide supply for our ever-growing demand. Again, that demand's greater year after year. It's not gonna go away overnight. And just to kind of emphasize the same point relative to Spanish Fork, we saw the same trend here. We're not any different. It was just 2017, in fact, that we got back to what, and I was kind of curious, our average over this period of time for new home construction was about 300 permits. We just exceeded that this past year. We're not any different. We're growing. But I'll mention this. If we just hit our average every year here, and we will be over that in 2018 like we were in 2017, because our population continues to grow, not on a flat line, but there's a curve to it. We won't keep pace with our own internal growth, much less the other things that influence what's going on. So again, that's just kind of my take on the matter of fact of the housing situation. So what can be done at the local government level? We can do what other communities are doing. We can approve big apartment complexes. And in fact, and I do appreciate this as the city's land use guy, that you as a council, I think, have been open-minded, you've been progressive, you've provided opportunities through some zoning changes for us to have something that we sorely need. We really do. Contemporary apartment complexes where, maybe a 240 or 300 unit kind of a way can provide a product that is sorely needed, that would help alleviate some of the pressure that exists relative to that deficiency in supply. That being said, I also think I have my finger a little bit on the pulse of just the realities of what happens in a community like Spanish Fork, and I do not see this happening on a broad scale. I really don't. I think for lots of different reasons that we don't need to talk about, any projects like these will be built in relatively remote places, places that frankly are kind of few and far between in Spanish Fork, maybe in areas that have just simply yet to develop, where you could have nice contemporary apartments built before their neighbors that then prove to be kind of a stumbling block to get through an approval process. But largely, I don't see this as being a way for us to help provide for the needs even of our own community. So we will continue to grow as well. I'm certain that we'll, like I mentioned, we'll issue more than 300 permits for new homes here in Spanish Fork this year, and that will have some effect, but kind of diminishing value over time relative to the need, and to get to the reason that we're here tonight, and why for me, relative to kind of a call to action, accessory apartments, and having a serious discussion about the prospect of being more permissive relative to the idea of somebody simply having a home within a home, if you will. And I'll throw up some headlines here in a minute. Likewise, this certainly has been a topic du jour of a lot of discussions in lots of different forums here as of late. The definition above, that's just taken directly from our zoning code. We do allow accessory apartments today, but they're frankly only allowed in some pretty limited areas. Accessory apartments are known by lots of different names. Mother-in-law apartments, probably that's the other one that I think in our community is the most common phrase to use, but can come in lots of different shapes and sizes and forms, and we won't get much into that tonight. Again, lots of discussion and lots of communities about accessory apartments, and one thing that I simply want to illustrate here is that it's not all kumbaya. Not everybody embraces the concept of maybe a neighbor having a basement apartment or different things like that. Even in Spanish Fork, we receive complaints about accessory apartments. And that, frankly, it doesn't dissuade me from the effort or what I think we need to do, but I do recognize that there are different perspectives and that there are needs that need to be addressed in order to make any accessory apartment program or any changes that we might put into play here functional and successful. So to make the case for accessory apartments, let's just say, or accessory dwelling units a little bit, they really can provide, in relative terms, some immediate relief to our housing situation. There is no quicker way to afford opportunities for people to find housing than by permitting accessory apartments on a broad scale. In addition to that, and just maybe looking at it from the perspective apartment renters perspective, the idea that it helps first-time home buyers qualify for mortgages, that is a very, very real component. I think, of why they can be beneficial. I think to a person, all of us in the room right now, we're homeowners. And I joke, for example, about the prospect of homeownership with my BYU interns all the time, and just that reality of how much harder it gets to qualify for a mortgage and to take that leap towards being able to invest and build equity in a home. Accessory apartments certainly can help, make that jump much easier and allow it to happen quicker for people. Other communities allow accessory apartments solely for the purpose of basically allowing for another set of eyes to live with elderly people. I'll talk about that again in a minute. So that kind of a situation, or simply allowing empty nesters. Empty nesters that perhaps, again, thinking about the housing stock that's been built along the Wasatch Front, those 4,000 and 5,000 square foot homes, fully finished basements. I've been told that sometimes as people age, they want to stay in their neighborhood, but for different reasons it becomes more of a challenge for them either to maintain that big home or to justify staying there. Just with one or two persons, accessory apartments can provide people with another avenue to age in place, not feel like they should move or maybe feel any financial pressure to do that. And frankly, allowing them more robustly gives us an opportunity to regulate them a little bit differently. Pretty quick here. We kind of touched on this. Lots of different groups are kind of the typical beneficiaries of opportunities to have accessory apartments. Same kind of thing here, just a little different phraseology. Some of the potential benefits.
In light of discussion, because you wanted some discussion with this, I don't know, you may have planned to talk about this or to touch, and if not, something that to look at on social media, which right now is where most of the accessory apartments are. What would be the word? Are being advertised, whether they're legal or not, inside the community and outside of Spanish Fork. I see quite a few, mostly because I have children that are of the age that they want to be out on their own, and depending on the day, I think my wife and I would like them to be out on their own as well. But with accessory apartments, and we know and recognize there's the shortage, there are benefits with it, but the advertisements, again, the postings really for these accessory apartments are more than what my mortgage has been for the past 15, 17 years. And so even though it may increase, as far as on paper, it may increase the supply, I don't, as the father of early 20-year-olds who are living with me because they can't afford even an accessory apartment that may legally or illegally exist here in our own community. And so they're being listed on Facebook. I'll use the reference, the medium, $1,200 to $1,400 as an average for 1 bedroom, 1 bath. And so my concern, and I'm not suggesting that government regulate what people can charge, but it provides supplemental income for the homeowners. That's debatable. I don't know that that's necessarily supplemental unless there are other spending habits there that require an awful lot more. But from what I'm seeing right now, the small inventory that at least people are willing to put out there, at the risk of someone finding it's legal or illegal, they're charging more than a mortgage I have been paying on a rather large home for 17 years. And so that's a very serious issue.
I've heard that issue raised before, and I'm going to go ahead and assume a few different things about the situation that leads to that happening. Anybody want to comment? I mean, what exists in order for somebody to be able to rent a basement, basically for what a lot of us pay for a 30-year mortgage payment? your
There's gotta be a
demand
market.
has got to just be nuts, right? And, you know, the opportunities that those people that are paying those rents to go someplace else must be pretty limited. Is there another way to look
Probably
at that?
the reason why they're paying it is because they don't have to go to Mike and get a loan.
Yeah.
And so to buy a home, and so they're gonna say, hey, this is how much I pay for a mortgage, and so, but I don't have to go through all the qualifications to get a loan. I can go in and move in right
They
now.
might not have the credit to be able to do it.
That's right.
Well, that and the supply demand area where you have a limited amount now because there's a certain segment of people that don't do it because they're like, well, if I do it, am I going to be the unlucky person that gets caught and something
SWAT team
happens?
the next day, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Dave's going to send the squad after me. But in that vein, the ones that are doing it know there's a little bit of a corner on that market and say, well, if I can do it, this is what I'm going to get to do it, to be willing to do it, right?
Yeah.
So really, some of that can be alleviated by opening up the supply where someone says, well, yeah, you wanted 1,000, but look, I can do the same thing down the road for 800. That makes sense. Okay, we'll do 800.
So that's
Hopefully.
largely how I kind of view those scenarios that I hear about. And frankly, that's a big part of the reason that I want to talk about this tonight with you guys. Let me mention this as well, as you brought up another point there. And I raised this thought with maybe some reservations. I don't really think it's necessarily the best fit for Spanish Fork, but relative to using accessory apartments to meet a specific housing need that is an affordable housing need, and maybe doing something to interfere with market forces there. Linden City allows accessory apartments very broadly, and they require people by deed to restrict their use of those accessory apartments, and they police this to where they can only rent those for a certain amount. And that amount is a defined number that you get from an equation that involves the median household income in the valley times 30%, and that's the maximum that they can rent those units for. And Linden City, they use that as their affordable housing program. So for example, when folks from the state come and knock on the door and say, what are you doing to provide affordable housing in your community? They show them that plan, they show them the records, and that's the end of the discussion. So those things certainly are on the table and could be talked about as well. I hadn't thought necessarily that was a direction we might want to go here, but you tell me if I'm wrong, and we can. I see a nod.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think in the state, he's saying $1,200. If I have rental units, I'm going to charge every penny I can, obviously, and rent I think's up 20+% in Utah, and in Spanish Fork I don't. If you see a rental unit, it's a rare, because in Spanish Fork there's not any rental units right now. And yeah, this is probably a good way to alleviate some of them, because I feel sorry for Kier. He's got all his kids living with him, and we need to get some rental units so that he can get them moved out. But they're going to charge that, and every now and then you have somebody that you'll see a post down again, and it's a basement apartment, and it's $600 because it's grandma supplementing her income, and it's gone in 2 seconds because it's just a basement apartment and not that great, but it serves a very good purpose.
You pointed out some of the articles that have come along even as a recent, and I know that tomorrow morning I'm going to wake up and read the paper, and I know Salt Lake City is having a public hearing tonight,
Really?
and in 2 weeks on a decision for Salt Lake City. And so I took the liberty last Friday of when I met with a friend that's a senator from Woods Cross, and asked him, because Kier touched on something about regulation, right? How do we do it with the least amount of regulation? Because I think the majority of us feel like, the less regulation that we have government-wise, the better. And as I talked to this senator about, any upcoming legislation that will include not only accessory dwelling, potential laws, but also maybe, like you touched on earlier, less regulation from cities because developers are feeling a pinch to, like you say, that we have too many regulations on them building a home, where
Right.
maybe in Spanish Fork we ask for a few more nails because we're a little windier here than maybe some of our neighbors, right? But we certainly don't want them to shirk on the quality of home that our developers are building here in our community. So I certainly think that there's going to be some sort of regulation. I feel like, because all I can think of is my situation, my neighbors, right? And they're not splitting utilities, and they're not maintaining parking. It's maybe getting a little out of control. So I think that having some things in place for Spanish Fork City, where we are, it will be us being ahead of the curve like we always try to be. So I think it's good to be talking about it and making sure we've got everything out in the open so that, again, like Keir said, how do we regulate it with the least amount of regulation that works best for everybody?
I think it's very well said, and I happen to agree completely with that. Councilman Scobes also touched on another thing, maybe inadvertently. And of course, from time to time, I hear that there may be one or two unapproved accessory apartments in the community in different parts of the city. And, certainly I think a very pragmatic part of this discussion is, is it appropriate to make those legal? And if so, how? We'll mention that as well. But, various benefits in different ways. Typically, there are some criteria that need to be met. These are typical. In fact, all but number 4 currently are a part of the program that we have here, where they're allowed in the city. And at the same time, oftentimes communities allow for different exemptions for people from some of these criteria, and typically it's number 1. But I mentioned that elderly persons. So, for example, in Provo, if you're over a certain age, you can have an accessory apartment in any part of the city. Otherwise, their zoning restricts accessory apartments to certain parts of the community. And again, that's done at least with the concept of there being some benefit in having additional folks living under the same roof as somebody that might from time to time need a little bit of assistance. And the idea of aging in place generally has tremendous value for people and their neighborhoods.
Our first apartment in Spanish Fork, Amber put the eye drops in Etheleen's eyes every night because she couldn't see herself to do it. It's pretty good. And I got my clothes folded for free. They were folded every time I got home, so it's great. It's a good trade-off.
What about pie?
We got pie too.
Who's
Pretty good.
Etheline? You lost me.
Etheline Brunson
Okay.
lived right down here on
Yes.
Center Street next to the Senior Center. The exchange was eye drops in the eyes every night that Amber went up and took care of, and we didn't ask for anything in return, but my clothes have not been folded. Careful. And folded. It's not so crisp.
Oh, they're
and clean
static.
and
Amber
perfect.
can't
Boy,
hear.
moving right along with this.
Stopped.
What were we talking about?
Sorry about that. I love you.
A fundamental part of the definition typically is that the owner of the property has to reside on premise, which helps alleviate and eliminate lots of problems that may exist from some type of multifamily situation where that's not the case. But people get called on military service, church service, educational things. Sorry, it's number 2. Oftentimes communities would have some type of an exemption for some period of time so that somebody other than the owner can reside there without losing that distinction as an accessory apartment. Like I mentioned when we started, I do recognize that there are concerns that arise, and maybe it's just the intensity of use that comes with an accessory apartment. I will tell you that in excess of 90% of the complaints that we get about accessory apartments. And to kind of put it in context, I'm talking about a dozen calls a year, probably. So it's not an overwhelming, part of what we deal with, or I think representation of how the community feels about what we have. It's parking. It's parking. It's parking. It's parking. Occasionally, people have parties on weekends that finally gives a neighbor courage to call and complain about an unpermitted accessory apartment, different things like that. But I'll tell you, from the accessory apartments that I have observed that are not allowed, if the home is well maintained and there aren't parking issues and different things like that, people just seem to sail under the radar forever, really. And let me say, that would be a big part of my goal in allowing accessory apartments in different parts of the city. Kind of the same concept as what we have for home occupations, which is that if you can do it in a home, but nobody knows you're doing it, that's great. If it has so little impact on the neighborhood, and if you're maintaining your property and doing some of those fundamental things, then really I'm at a point, and some of you that have been around for a while and have heard us talk about accessory apartments, maybe the discussion we were having 10 years ago, it's saying a little different tune then. But I've completely bought into the idea now that it can be done without having an adverse impact on a neighborhood, and therefore it's something that we really should consider. So that being said, we are very, very fortunate to have, I'm certain, the best public information officer south of Provo with us. He's going to help us go through a process, and I think this is really, really important, that we are methodical and deliberate as we think maybe about what the specific regulations should or shouldn't be for accessory apartments. And I think that involves kind of a relook even at the regulations that we have in place today. And I do think time matters here a little bit to kind of give the community an opportunity to maybe just mentally digest what we're trying to accomplish and why it's important to try to provide more opportunities for housing today than we have in the past. That being said, before I turn things over to Scott, let me say I'm very committed to the idea to do whatever we can to come up with a program that works, that is functional so that people don't resent potentially having more accessory apartments in their neighborhood, that works for all of the purposes that we touched on as being prospective benefits of accessory apartments. And with that, I think the right kind of community outreach can certainly help us achieve that goal.
Thanks, Dave. That was very generous statement, compliment there. So as Dave mentioned, as a staff, there's a commitment to finding a way to make this work. There's a commitment to the need for these ADUs within the community. Now we need to discover and make a commitment to the how. And that can't happen just on the staff side. That can't happen just on the elected official side. It's really got to happen throughout the community. And we are dependent on our residents to work with us in identifying how can we make this work so that we can resolve some of the housing issues within our community. And so some ways that we've identified as a staff that we will be going through for the next few months. As Dave mentioned, we want to come up with some ideas, by the end of the year, bring them to the council beginning of next year. And so some of the methodologies and tools that we'll be using to garner input from our residents are kind of the following. We really first want to speak with individuals in small groups, in these focus groups, individuals that maybe have lived in accessory dwelling units in the past, maybe individuals that have those currently, individuals that would be interested in having those, individuals that live near them, and figure out in these small groups what's working, what doesn't work, what are some of the big issues that you've seen. Dave mentioned parking and some others. what are some ideas that we can implement to resolve some of those concerns. So first and foremost, we'll be doing some focus groups with these different groups. Second, we'll do a community-wide survey and open it up to the general public and say, again, some of those same questions. What are some of the barriers? What are some of the benefits? And how can we resolve those throughout the community? Third, we'll have, various public meetings to discuss this and kind of the concepts that we're coming up with. And then lastly, do additional research. What are other communities doing that they have found to be effective? We're not the only ones that are, that are looking at this now or have looked at it in the past, and we can learn a lot from other communities. Granted, Spanish Fork, we like to go above and beyond, right, and be trailblazers in that, in one aspect. So we definitely want to learn from others, but figure out what it is that can be unique and specific to our needs here in Spanish Fork. So we encourage residents, as we do some public outreach over the next few months, to be active and participate and lend your voice and your input regarding this concept so that we can figure out what works best for our community and what works best for your neighborhoods.
Scott, thank you. Mayor, Council, thank you for your time. I know we took more than we typically do, but this I really do think is a big deal for the community for more than one reason. Thanks. If you have anything for us now, we'd love to hear it. Otherwise, we'll certainly be back in touch.
Yeah, we appreciate that, and I'm sure we'll have, if we have some ideas in that, let's get with Scott, and we can, I'm sure we all have some good ideas.
Sure. Thank you.
And all the citizens too, so. Okay, moving along here, consent items.
Motion to approve the consent items.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
New business. Okay. We will. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay. The county has reached out to us and asked if the cities in the south end of the county can all declare a disaster declaration because of the fires and potential flooding coming. Spanish Fork City residents really aren't in danger per se. We do have a small spring which will likely have some potential debris flow that we've been working hard to control and may benefit from maybe some disaster funding if that ever materializes. But to show solidarity with the other cities and the county, we'd recommend that you approve this declaration.
Hey, Chris, you know those flood Jersey barriers?
Yes.
Flood walls?
Yes.
Update us on those.
So those got sent to Payson to help with their flood control, as well as most all our sandbags ended up going to Woodland Hills, Oak Ridge, and a lot of equipment has been helping out. We've been doing a lot to help the neighbors, and as we know they would do for us if we were in a similar circumstances. But those barriers, I believe, were a good investment.
There you go.
My brother, that's a business owner in Payson, noticed him today and commented on him. So I thought that was neat. Thank you.
We will get reimbursed for those soon from the agency.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve the declaration of emergency.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Scobes. This will be a roll call vote. Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
That passes. Canyon Creek Parkway, Canyon Creek Drive Guardrail 2018 project.
Okay, our streets department is really excited about this project because there is right now a picket fence here. It's a vinyl picket fence on Canyon Crest Drive. You have that elementary school over here, Spanish Oaks Elementary, and that vinyl picket fence is always having problems, and they seem to be repairing it all the time. It's a nice view there, so we don't want to block the view, but it doesn't feel right to not have some sort of visual barrier there where it is quite steep right here. But they feel like the picket fence has got to go. And so what we did is bid out doing a guardrail along here that will preserve the view, protect the steep embankment, and then there's another spot, if you could go to the next page. Our new Canyon Creek Parkway. Again, this is a temporary situation in some regards. Eventually, the main road will curve, come like this, and end up going up 12th West in Springville, all the way up to Provo, and then this road will come in perpendicular. So this curve right here will be gone in the future, but at least right now, where the fields are down low and the roads are built up quite a bit, especially when it's snowy, we tend to get cars, visiting the pastures here and here and here, and so these guardrails would help keep them on the road and going, probably with minor insurance claims, Brandon, but at least they'll be alive to claim the insurance. Okay. I've sent that off actually already. So.
Did you only have one bidder?
That's a good question. Let me open that up.
I see an engineer's estimate, and then
Yes.
Okay.
We only had one bidder, and it was higher than the estimate and the budget by, it's higher than the budget by $7,000. The budget was $125,000, and the low bid was $132,000. So we feel like where this is a safety issue, we'd recommend approval of this and get it done before winter.
Any questions, comments? If there is none, I would entertain a motion.
motion to approve the Canyon Creek Parkway, Canyon Crest Drive Guardrail 2018 project.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, a second by Councilman Scopes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Canyon Creek Phase 10 Development Agreement.
Thank you, Mayor. I think you might be familiar with this. We talked about it some months ago. We're ready to move forward. This is related to the Lowe's site, and there are a number of roads that need to be built, some utilities that need to be brought in. Many of these are impact fee related projects. What we have done in this agreement to facilitate that project and get Lowe's here is we have agreed to front the cost for the impact fee portion of these improvements. And we say front the cost. The developer will go out and bid it and actually install it, but as they get invoiced, we'll pay our percent of that, and we'll reimburse ourselves with impact fees over time. So to quickly go through what we're getting, Canyon Creek Parkway will pay for 58.4% of that. Marketplace Drive, 54.3% of that. The 48-inch stormwater drain line, 88% of that. And there's also some drinking water, irrigation, and sewer that need to go in that are not impact fee related. We won't pay anything toward that. So with that in mind, we're seeking approval of this to facilitate the Lowe's site.
Any questions? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Canyon Creek Phase 10 Development Agreement.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Argal. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Parkway Professional Plaza Contract Addendum.
So a few weeks ago, we did an addendum to this contract that spelled out the phasing, and actually this is the project up along Highway 51 that Chris Child is buying about 7 acres from us, combined with some other property he has. He's building some office buildings and some residential living units there. He amended it recently to take down a larger chunk of land in the first phase, and he provided us the legal description. As we've been working with the title company, the description he provided to us was wrong. He actually already owns some of that, so it's kind of Chris's mistake, but we need to fix that. So our initial takedown will be a little bit less than we anticipated, and it's about $10,000 less that we'll receive, but it's property he already owns. But because we've approved that recently, I wanted to specifically talk about, let you know what happened and what we're doing to correct that. And if you approve this, then we'll close that here in the next couple of days and get our first installment of money, which is a couple $100,000.
Any questions? Not, I'd entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Parkway Professional Plaza contract addendum.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Scobes, a second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, ordinance 19-18, establishing parking requirements on Kirby Lane.
We talked about this last meeting, the fact that we were having trucks park along Kirby Lane. It was creating some problems. We were having some complaints from some businesses. It's directed to create an ordinance to prohibit parking there, and we're going to wait on some of the others. However, as I went out and looked at it, the new alignment of Commerce Way is such that two of our key businesses, Wiggy Wash and the new hotel that's coming, actually don't front on Kirby Lane any longer. They will front on Commerce Way. And so I took the liberty to modify this ordinance a little bit. So we're prohibiting parking on either side of Kirby Lane and on Commerce Way between Kirby Lane and Kirby Court, as well as on Kirby Court. So Kirby Court is a little tiny stretch that goes from Commerce Way back into the Hydro plant, the old SAPA plant. And Commerce Way is the line that loops around that cut out some of the old Kirby Lane and created this problem. So this protects those businesses that are there, and feel that this is appropriate to expand it just a little bit. Now, the other place we talked about are Marketplace Drive and maybe Spanish Fork Parkways that get up by the hospital, but we'll review that as we discussed last time, coming months and years as the traffic increases. But for now, we felt this protects the business where the problem exists today.
Maybe I missed the discussion last time. Did I?
We weren't here. You weren't here.
I wasn't here. In spirit, I was. But did we find out that it's mostly the Hydro trucks coming to and from there, or is it
It's
just...
mostly not, because Hydro has plenty of parking on site for their vehicles.
Okay.
By staying at the hotel.
Okay.
You mentioned no parking, but don't we allow for 2 hours?
I just put no parking at all here. We can adjust it while we're doing it for 2 hours. Oh, no, excuse me. We did talk about 2 hours, and I did draft it that way as I looked.
So it is 2 hours.
It's 2 hours.
Okay.
So
Thanks,
let's talk through that, because I think some of these roads have different needs than them all being treated the same. So this is Kirby Lane, and there's room and adequate ability there. Can you pull up get the map, maybe this one here.
Yeah.
Adequate room for parking to be beyond Kirby Lane, but you get into this cul-de-sac here, it eventually turns into a wider bold cul-de-sac back there. That becomes a little bit tricky. It's not very wide. It's not intended to have parking, and go ahead and pull that map up for them. So that's Kirby Court right here that I was just talking about. And this is the view I had with the semi-trucks, Wiggy Wash, the hotel. And then this loop is Commerce Way. We, the city, don't actually regulate anything on Commerce Way right here because it's a privately owned road. But we do potentially control along that section. That's a public road. So I don't think we want, well, let me pull up an image. Sorry, Junior.
So Holly's got that up. So the ordinance limits it 2 hours there, 2 hours here, and 2 hours from here to here. So this is where the new hotel in Wiggy Wash will be, is right in here.
See, there's times I've come down here, there's semis on both sides, been parked here,
Obviously, the pictures I'm getting is a truck parked right here in front of this business, which makes, of course, this business is just in and just out traffic, and that's their whole business. And a truck like this, which I guess I could have uploaded you the pictures they sent me, but it's a truck like this that's down there a little ways closer to the business, is tough.
We've had some that if they're not blocking driveway, they're affecting it.
Exactly. Minivan mom trying to pull in and out of the wash says, forget it, I can't see to go in and out, and doesn't go to that business. You know, and it's not just the truck that parked there to grab a taco, but they have the hood open and are actively working on the engine of a truck. That's a long time.
Now, this may not, as it's written, may not fix all that because we're allowing 2 hours. But we're not allowing somebody that's going to park there all day or all night.
And certainly, nobody should be blocking anybody's access at any point, right? Like
that should be just illegal already, right? So
yeah.
But
blocking access.
the problem when you got with the big semi, he could not be blocking the driveway, but he could be 5 feet away from that driveway. And in essence, you're still blocking that. You know, even though he's not right there blocking it, they can't come out, they can't see. So, I mean, that's something we need to look at.
So is it, well, and now is a great time for it, oh boy, let's see if I can grab that. Okay.
I mean, that's a tough spot. You know, a business here, you're as far as a hotel, you're coming in, you're going to park there, you're going to be there for a while, but you have, with an approval of a flex serve car wash here, their only business is to have cars coming in, going through, and going out, and doing that 1,000 times a day. And so a truck parked, because that's not red right there, inhibits this ability to see left when you pull out, and should I turn this way, should I turn this way? I can't see to really go either.
Junior, what's our ordinance already on city streets for a tractor trailer? I know in a residential zone, I can't have a tractor trailer, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah. Dave or Steve, if you can chime in on that.
Yeah, there's a rule that you cannot park a semi-trailer in a residential area. Unless you're doing commerce, if you're dropping something off, you can do that.
But that same ordinance does not apply in a commercial zone.
This is commercial.
Okay, so we can specifically outlaw vehicles of certain weights on this road and this road if we want to. To park, yeah, thank you. As we look down, that's not the one I want. As we look, oh, thanks. This is Commerce Way. So right, this section of Commerce Way, this is the striping pattern on Commerce Way already. So I think we can just simply outlaw parking here because the striping pattern doesn't allow for it.
Yeah.
You outlaw it, you paint that red?
No, you just don't park there.
They can't park
You
there
can't park
because
there.
there's no room to park.
There's not a.
So
you pull someone over for blocking the lane? Yeah. So it's outlawed just by that stripe.
can you pull somebody over that is already blocking the lane? Because aren't they pulled over? But
I meant after they left from blocking.
You have to park behind them, then when they leave, you have to re-pull them
So,
over.
like I said, there's been a lot of times where I've come down here and there's, on both sides of this right here, there's been at least 4 semis
so
parked.
yeah, the striping pattern on Commerce Way makes it so parking isn't really possible on this stretch of road, this loop of road here. So really, I think our focus is on the Kirby Lane and Kirby Court, and what's the pleasure of the council on
Can we
parking?
stripe that in the same way?
Yeah, it's just too. Well, I guess we could put a center lane in there.
Well, are we going to still
I
say
don't know how wide
that?
it is.
But if you do that, then you completely restrict the parking here.
Right, and that.
I have a kind of an issue with the big truck parking there because of what that is, a little bit. But another thing is this is now a huge setup area for SAPA.
Correct.
Do we need to maybe communicate to them that these trucks can't be, I mean, I understand here coming down here to eat dinner or get a drink or something before you leave. I get that, but this area, they've got this all dirt. I don't know what they're going to do with it. Do you know?
Yeah, it's a parking lot.
It's going to be for parking.
Yeah, they still have a little bit of interior work that needs to be done, such as lighting and things like that.
Okay, so that they can communicate to some of these. So I know the company, the truck drivers that's leaving these trucks, and they are leaving them overnight and even sometimes 2 nights.
So, but
That needs to stop.
are these guys really associated with SAPA?
That's not.
That's
No.
a bunch of wood.
That's not.
Yeah.
He stopped to go get a.
And that's not either.
Ritzy Bob.
Night's not. They usually have either flatbed trailers or their cloth enclosed trailers that are hauling the aluminum out of there.
SAPA tells us that they do not have trucks associated with them parking on this road. Historically, Kirby Lane, but further toward SAPA was an overnight parking spot for semis.
Future.
Not associated with Hedro or
Yeah.
SAPA, but just simply,
They were doing it.
I've got no
Because it was
place
a-
to leave my truck. I'm going
Right.
to park it here, and then I'm going to drive home and sleep in Spanish Fork tonight. And then tomorrow I'm going to go grab the rig and continue my journey.
So can we, I mean, like I said, you got businesses all along here. Well, I don't want to restrict the parking, but can we make that in front of the Wiggy Wash red so that they
Yeah.
don't park there? All, no cars.
We could do that.
I agree with that, Chad. I'm nervous about saying,
None.
I'm nervous about painting this red so they don't park here right while we have a beautiful hotel under construction here. And as soon as they come out of ground, if that's not painted red or there's some restriction there, I would be pretty angry if I'm that hotel. They're going to be the next phone calls to us saying, hey, they moved down the road from Wiggy because you told them to, and they're right in front of our hotel. And our entrance and exit is,
But did I hear Seth correctly that we cannot regulate this?
no, you can't. That's
It's just
commerce
this second.
That's private.
from this T.
This
That's all commerce, clear up and around.
this section we can.
Yes, all the way to Kirby.
Here we don't.
We just, Chief, what's your, I know you say 2 hour, but I think our problem is these guys are parking overnight.
Too. I think that the truckers have to have an opportunity to grab a sandwich too. And so I think that you take baby steps with this. And I think what Junior's outlined.
Hey, Chief.
2 hour.
Hey, don't interrupt the chief when
He's
he's
got
talking.
really good things to say that people wanna be able to-
Travis was about to pull his own gun on the chief.
Sorry.
Travis has a gun? 2 guns.
He's got 2 guns.
I think what Junior's outlined here goes a long way. I think we should take baby steps with this just to see how things go. He's outlined it where we have seen the problems with the semis parking as well as individuals parking personal vehicles. If we limit that to 2 hours, it gives the opportunity for individuals coming through Spanish Fork to stop and get a sandwich, stop and go shopping, and maybe even see a movie if the movie's not too long. But I think you start with that, and then if you have to tighten it up a little bit further, then you move further on with that.
Hey, Chief, I've noticed an influx and had a lot of people talking about this area right here by North Park as well for semi-truck traffic overnight.
Yes.
Have you noticed that?
We've talked about that. Seth and I have talked about that, and there's a lot of the trucks that park there are related to the Costco.
Gotcha.
And it's private park, it's private property. We can't regulate that, but we can certainly ask Tenador.
I haven't had a follow-up from them, but yeah.
Because Seth had noticed it and had some complaints perhaps, and we tried to get it addressed just because you see 1 or 2 trucks parking there, then the truckers think that's the place to go.
Truck stop.
That'll take care of itself as they get that phase of development.
That'll go away. Okay,
Good discussion.
so right now we've got, it states 2 hours.
Takes 2 hours.
Okay.
Do we want to change it?
No, I think we leave it.
Just
2
say-
hours. Just, I agree with the chief, and anytime someone has a gun, I'm gonna follow what he says.
Well, that's not the only reason.
Oh, well, okay.
Well, and I guess I'm okay taking that baby step at Chief's recommendation, but I know the one business, if it is 2 hours and it's in the busy time, that they're going in and out of
But
they're going to make another phone call and they're going to say, and not that you can't send out a car and just say, hey, how long you been here? You need to go. They say you've been here a while, and that's what's going to happen until it needs to go.
And that's why I have a problem with 2 hours, is because on Main Street, as Main Street business was under construction, they would come, they would park, they'd get out with their lunchbox, and they'd go to work, and they'd come back, and they'd maybe move their vehicle once or twice, but it's tough to enforce for our guys. We're busy.
It is.
But
They were involved in that.
Right,
Yeah.
but I think here, the problem is that these ones are staying overnight. You know, the 4 I've seen are the ones that have been there overnight. So if we say you can't come, and if it's just a 2 hour to start with, I mean, it's like Junior said and the Chief says, we can always change it,
Well,
We start at 2 hours and see if that's not solving the problem, then we can say, we can limit to no.
and if it was overnight, that really the business I'm talking about wouldn't even notice if they pulled in at 8, 9 o'clock and left
They're
at
there,
7.
but they're during the day. So when I've gone down there, they've been there during
Middle of the day.
Yeah, it's not overnight. They've been parked there all
Some of your
day.
long-haul truckers who, that's a free place to stop versus going to a truck stop where they may get charged a few dollars to stay overnight.
We could give them a coupon to Chick-fil-A to go over there. There's kind of a lot of asphalt at a closed down Kmart right there. I think they could find a spot.
I think they'll find that on their own as we take this action.
All right. Any other comments, discussion?
The way the ordinance is written, Junior, I think it allows for parking on Commerce Way, right?
It's unlawful for any person to park any vehicle on either side of Kirby Lane, Commerce Way between Kirby Lane and Kirby Court, or Kirby Court for a period of time longer than 2 consecutive hours.
Right, so that allows me to park on Commerce Way.
For 2 hours.
And we don't want to park on Commerce Way ever. That's the
Shouldn't we
one
even
that
take
has.
it out? We don't control it.
We don't, it's not ours.
We do over here.
Well, so what
Same road.
What is
But we don't have room enough for them to park, right?
saying between these 2
So
points?
that's what
so
I'm
we
saying.
should put it in.
Yeah. So why would we allow for parking that can't exist? Is all
So
I'm
can
saying.
we pull that out?
So I think we need to pull Commerce Way.
Pull Commerce Way out?
It's
because
it's
they can't
unlawful to park
there
on
anyway.
Commerce Way.
Is
And do
that
we need
okay?
to?
Everybody else okay with that?
Yep.
Okay?
Yeah. Is it clearly defined that is Commerce Way, that section though?
The road is named Commerce Way. Is that what you mean?
I mean, if someone
just talking about that section.
enters in on Kirby Lane, they come down and they park on the section between Kirby Lane and Kirby Court that is known as Commerce Way.
Back to that picture. that
Where
you
there's a
showed.
truck right now.
Yes. Is it clearly defined so
No, the
they
road's
know
different.
that the road they turned on has changed name for that section?
If anything, the confusion would work in our favor to keep them from parking there.
Well, right. But I hate to have someone get a ticket.
But if you go back to that picture,
trying to do what's
you
right.
show
Well,
that we don't have.
There's no ticket
right.
because we haven't prohibited by this ordinance if we just strike that out.
Yep.
We're going to put signs, right?
Okay.
Okay.
Sign.
All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve ordinance 19-18, establishing a parking requirement on Kirby Lane and Commerce Lane with the changes discussed.
Not Commerce.
It'll just be Kirby Lane and
Kirby Lane, we're taking
Kirby
Commerce
Lane
out.
and Kirby Court.
Yes.
Second.
It's a 4-way stop.
Okay, we've got a motion by Councilman Argal, a second by Councilman Gordon. This will be a roll call
Kirby Lane
vote.
stops.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye.
Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
All right, that passes. Resolution 18-14, authorizing the Public Works Director to execute subdivision bond agreements.
So from time to time, the council has authorized other staff members to execute contracts when they've been a form contract that come up fairly frequently. For some reason, we have not done that with our subdivision bond agreements, which are a standard form. It's just fill in the blank, and we do these frequently. Every time we have a subdivision, they post a bond for the improvements. Chris fills in the name of the developer, fills in the amount, And up to now, the mayor's needed to sign these. We're proposing that we allow Chris to sign these, and you have attached in with your agenda the standard form, so you've had a chance to look at that. You lose some income there.
Okay, any questions on that? If you're okay with that, I'd entertain a motion.
I move that we approve Resolution 18-14 authorizing the Engineer Public Works Director to execute subdivision bond agreements.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Scobes, a second by Councilman Mendenhall. This is a roll call vote. Councilman Mendenhall.
Aye.
Councilman Scobes.
Aye.
Councilman Argal.
Aye.
Councilman Gordon.
Aye, aye.
Oh, you did Stacy's
I
then.
did twice.
Doubled it.
Okay, Pole Canyon Ball Mountain Fire contracts.
During the beginning of the Pole Creek? I'm mixing them all. Bald Mountain.
Pole Creek
and
Bald
Bald Mountain
Mountain.
fires. The Forest Service reached out to us on a Wednesday evening and said, we think we're coming. We're sending, well, it wasn't a Wednesday evening, I think it was on Wednesday, and asked if they could consider the fairgrounds as a site for their incident command. And by Wednesday night, they had determined, yes, we're coming in full force, and Thursday they were setting up their camps. Of course, we all know that. And in some direction that we received from you as a council is make sure that they can get their logistics set up so they can fight that fire and it doesn't burn any houses. And I'm happy to report for them that they put up a nice big goose egg on that. They didn't have any houses burned, which is pretty dang cool. For how many hundreds of thousands of acres burned. So that's a good goose egg. But in the process of them setting up camp, we worked with them to identify a lot of different logistical needs that they had, and in the end, they wanted 6 contracts with the city. So we've entertained those 6 contracts, and in order to help them move forward, we wanted to give them a level of certainty, but reviewing everything, it needs your approval. This needs your guidance. So I want to just briefly touch on each of these contracts. Won't take a whole lot of time, but they have one contract with us to allow them to dip water out of the reservoir. I don't believe that they ever did, and we charge them $0. If they would have ever dipped out of there, we charge them $0, and we didn't. I think it's a 5 million gallon reservoir, and we figured if they took 200, 300, 400 gallons, we'd never notice. Yeah, I think that's a little bit big.
Could have got some goldfish.
But they didn't use that one, but we gave them the rights to dip from there, and I said if you needed to dip there, if you needed to pay us anything, put $1, and they must have been comfortable that they didn't need to pay anything. So that one is just a contract to use and no payment. They're using our water in order to feed, bathe, clean, everything associated with their campsite. And so they have drinking water, they have non-drinking water, and they have a gray water dump. So their shower water, their refuse water, and things like that, they actually take to our sewer treatment plant. And they're just paying the metered rate, which is different for each one, but ranges from 82 cents per 1,000 gallons and $1.52 per 1,000 gallons to dump at the sewer. These guys were in their original one. They were paying. They offered some kind of a rate of per gallon, like $1 per gallon, and like no. Our rate's per 1,000 gallons. They were pretty happy about that. And the goal here was to not take advantage of the circumstances. Cool. But cool. The goal here isn't that the residents of Spanish Fork pay to have them here, in our facilities. And so some of these contracts will get into a few more dollars. They set up for a few days. I want to say it was 5 days at the senior center. When they get into these big fires, they have people sleeping during the daytime, because they have crews working all night long, a day crew and a night crew. That night crew, when they get off, they go eat, they clean up, and then they need somewhere quiet and cool to sleep. So it's typically indoors somewhere. And for the first few nights, they were using the senior center. So we displaced the senior center operations for a week while they slept there. But it was far enough away that people didn't want to go that far away. They became disconnected from the camp, and it just wasn't as ideal. So they were sleeping 1 or 2, 3 people only, and it really wasn't serving the needs. And so we eventually adjusted, and we let them where they were at the fairgrounds already. We shut down the tennis building and had the swamp coolers in there, and it's dark. We put up some darkening things in the skylights that they have there, and they began to use that. So they offered to pay us up to $2,000 to sleep in the senior center for a week and a half, which ended up being only a week. But we negotiated that down to only $1,000. Some of our negotiating skills go down and some go up, but so they paid $1,000 for that. They offered to, or they used our alfalfa field that we commonly call the partridge piece on South Lane. People probably saw tents and a shower unit. There was a gas truck parked in our trail parking lot there for a handful of days. I think they were there for 10 days altogether, and they offered and are paying us $100 a day to use that, and so that one's closed out, and I think it was a 10-day use there. So they'll eventually pay us a check, write us a check for $1,000 there. The two main contracts that really saw the most use and wear and tear and city assets is at the Spanish Fork Airport and at the fairgrounds. So at the airport, we ended up moving all of the airplanes and aircraft out of the way, and that took a lot of coordination with the airplane owners. And so we usually get tie-down rents and things like that. We moved all those away, and we lost that tie-down rent. They paid us $1,000 to be at the airport for as long as they have been, which it just barely left. I think it was today. Started leaving yesterday, and I think most of them are gone now. But there is a charge of 5 cents on the fuel. When people fuel up at our airport today, there's a 5 cent per gallon charge that the city collects on that fuel, and that same charge was tendered on all of the gallons sold there. So we'll receive that. Really, the revenue that the airport will receive for the use of the airport, like it saw, will be on the sales, and they did have a lot of gas used there. The coolest helicopter that I saw in this whole attack was that one that kind of looked like a mosquito, the air tanker. That one was pretty cool. And that helicopter will burn 400 gallons of fuel an hour. And I think we had 3 of those mosquitoes flying around, usually about 8 hours a day. So you get a sense of the amount of fuel. So they will pay that.
The day you and I and Brandon drove around, one of those tankers that supply gas to some of the other federal trucks,
yeah.
Didn't they say that they bought gas from a local gas station here too? I mean, they fill up their tank with a local tank.
Yeah. This particular vendor, I think, was buying from the Sinclair on Main Street. I know a lot of the airport fuel comes from, I want to say Christensen Oil does jet fuel, which is a higher octane, pure fuel for those jet engines. So yeah, a tremendous amount of money, I think, was pumped into the economy that way for sure. And then at the fairgrounds, this one, the maximum, they really wanted a maximum on this one, and we've had our employees working there at the fairgrounds like they always do. And if somebody's renting the High Chaparral, the Ponderosa, the parking lot, the Willie Barn, the Heritage Arena, or the outdoor arena, any of those, our guys do the work to keep those facilities going, and they do the work to prep and clean, etc. So we negotiated with them that the daily rate for using the High Chaparral and the Ponderosa would be the basis for them being there, and not charge them the daily rate for the back parking lot, the daily rate for the tennis court buildings. And then they have consumed a lot of electricity. At their peak operations, they were each meter was flowing like a church on Sunday. So they were consuming quite a bit of electricity each day in those, and I think we have 4 meters there. So they included an amount for electricity, which will total $25,000 at the fairgrounds, and that will end up being about 25 days of total use, which they plan on leaving. The Type 1 team, we just got word, will transition out Friday morning, but I don't know yet if they'll transition away from the fairgrounds. They might keep their operation there. So this one is $1,000 a day, and it has a minimum of $10,000, which they passed on the 10th day, and has a maximum of 25. And as we talked through with their financing people, we felt like we would be sure we would be able to recover all of our costs, both our labor costs as well as some of the material. We've brought in rocks. We brought in 4 truckloads of rocks, gravel, and engineered fill to smooth out some passable lanes for them, for their vehicles, and we built a bridge for them to get it to a new spike camp, and a few things like that to make sure that we followed the direction you gave us, which was make sure they can put those fires out and don't have to worry about where they put their head at night and how they sleep. So after doing all of these contracts, we feel like the affairs of the city will be fine, but at the same time, we did not take advantage of the federal government and their need to locate in an emergency situation and fight these fires. So what I'm looking for is your ratification of these contracts, and you're okay for what we have proposed today. With that, I'll entertain any questions you may have on what we've discussed.
Good work.
Way to go.
Well done.
Thank you. All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So this is for our facilities. There are different arrangements for the fire personnel. And for some functions that our people did and others do, there's actually reimbursement that comes to the city. And for other functions, there isn't. When our firefighters are functioning as our firefighters, they actually just are our firefighters, and you would expect that. But throughout this incident, our firefighters were engaged and sent by incident command to specific areas, and so that would fall under the firefighting agreement, which I believe we do that just about every year. Maybe not every year, but pretty close to every year. We do send people to help in fire incidents throughout the state, and sometimes we could go out of state, but we typically try to support those. And it's pretty cool when you look around our fairgrounds during that height of this fire and see all the different local Utah agencies that were here supporting South Utah County with the fires that we had. So, thank you.
I'd entertain a motion.
Motion to approve Pole Creek Bald Mountain Fire contracts.
Second.
Need to read them all? Okay.
Oh, please don't.
Okay.
Got a motion by Councilman Argyle, a second by Councilman Mendenhall. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Eaton annexation exception request.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. We request that the council accept the Eaton annexation for further study.
All right.
Dave, did you hear anything more than what we discussed? Not Pete. Okay. Just information, I was reached out by
Jimmy?
Yeah, Jim Eaton, and he just expressed that the rest of those citizens in that area have also an interest in being annexed in. Possibility, and the Larsons, Jay Rindlisbacher, along that would actually take that whole piece out to the highway after those few people that wanted to be, but had some concerns obviously with some other things. So hopefully they will. And Ryan Kerr was coming to talk to the engineering department today or yesterday. So, okay, thanks, Dave.
Thank you.
Okay. I entertain a motion.
I move we approve the Eaton annexation for further study.
Second.
A motion by Councilman Mendenhall, a second by Councilman Argyle. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Discussion. We doing the annexation buyout policy? Going once? Going twice? Well, then get up here.
I thought you said eat annexation.
Oh, my gosh.
All right. We've talked a little bit about this in theory, and now we're going to talk a little bit more about it in theory. We want your direction on if we should continue to application. If we should continue putting together some formal policy for your review and approval. When we have annexations, so the Eaton annexation, I assume you accepted that one. Sorry, I stepped out.
Yeah.
For further study. All right. So that Eaton annexation, when you accept an annexation, historically in Spanish Fork, the policy has been that the city will provide all the utility services eventually for that area. And so specifically as it relates to electricity, when there is a provider, whether it be the South Utah Valley Electric Service District or Rocky Mountain Power, we will do an inventory, and the provider, the incumbent provider of that county area, will do an inventory and identify poles that they may have, transformers that they may have for that houses that they serve. And we will, by state law, propose to purchase those assets from that provider and bring those assets into our operation. And at some future date, maybe immediately and maybe a ways down the road, we will begin to provide electric service to that area. Historically, it's been our position that we let development get to the area before we begin to provide services. And that's something I think we will want to keep talking about, but we don't need to talk about that aspect of this at the moment. What we want to talk about is who pays for the poles and transformers and wires associated with that annexation. Historically, the annexing entity, usually the landowners, farmers, pay for those poles. And sometimes annexations could be expensive, but sometimes they are not expensive as it relates to poles. It really just depends on the area and how much development is there. We're really only talking about farm areas typically, right? Obviously they're county being annexed into the city, so they're not very developed. But if the area is really large, say the East Bench around Maple Mountain High School, when the Stillman annexation came in, that was a very, very large area that had lots of barns and a few houses here and there and lots of poles. And so that annexation was, the value on that annexation, those poles, was on the order of $100,000. The Annie's Acres annexation over here, that is Randall Bradford area, that you're familiar with that area, is one of our more recent annexations. That annexation for poles and such was about $17,000. The Morrell annexation, which is on the south end of Main Street, near Woodland Hills Drive, where Main Street and Woodland Hills Drive connect in that general area, that annexation, we don't have a true buyout number, but our crews have given it an estimate, a very generous estimate, and they put that around $18,000 to $20,000 for the poles and such. If we were to go build that overhead, we would pay probably more than that because we're getting the poles for a depreciated value. We're getting the transformers for a depreciated value. So the question that we've kind of been debating today is should we have the annexing farmer, should we have them pay for the poles and stuff that have been servicing them that they probably paid for when they built their house? Should we have them pay for it again? And then as that asset is folded into our inventory and we begin to sell power to them, use those facilities, so we're generating revenue off of that, of course, as a customer. And then when it develops, that landowner, or if they sell it to a developer or somebody, whoever does the development, they'll tear down those overhead poles, they'll put in an underground system, and they pay for that, so they're paying for it again. So you could look at it that possibly they paid for it 3 times. Originally when they put it up for their provider when they built their house, Then when they annexed into the city, they paid some amount. And then when it developed into something more urban than rural, a third time. And as a staff, we've kind of gone back and forth and had great discussions, but I think as a group, we feel that the policy to require the annexing party to pay for that infrastructure upon annexation may be too much, and maybe something that the electric utility should pay for, because they are going to use that asset to serve that customer until that future time. And specifically, that asset's going to disappear when they do develop. So that's what we're going to talk about with you. What are, as you consider that, it seems like it's potentially heavy-handed. It is what we've been doing for 20 years, and it's been what it's been. We do know that there are a handful of families, as they've annexed, as they've gone through the process, have said, we don't want to continue anymore. That cost of buying out the power to the city is too much. They don't have any desire to develop, and so they don't have a way to push that cost maybe onto the development. So that's probably one good example of a recent annexation. They said, you know what, never mind. We want to stop that. So we wanted to have this conversation, and like I said, we've talked about it significantly with DRC. So Chris has input. Junior's had his input. Dave, Kelly, Peterson, and the DRC. Kent, you get involved in this to some degree as well, so you may have some thoughts. But I think it's our proposal that we draft a change and have it be that the city purchase that upon annexation.
So when I was discussing with Dave made a comment that I absolutely agree with, that as we look to the future, and just for an example, this annexation heads towards the exit in Benjamin. Sooner or later, somebody's going to come in and want to develop it there, and we may not have that annexed property in and or be able to, because it's maybe next to these costs would keep even me as an individual would keep me from, if I had to pay $15,000-$20,000 to annex into the city. I know that buys me some rights, water, sewer, probably in the future or whatever, but I would second that. I agree with, like they said, they probably paid for them. Most of them probably paid for them to be extended when they were extended to get the power and put their home in. Probably paid for the poles and stuff to be connected. And that as that develops and goes underground, of course, the developments would then put it underground, and hopefully they would then take it. So I'll second. I agree with that. I want them to come in because they want to be in Spanish Fork, and not at a cost so high that they can't afford to be here, so that we're prepared more for the future. I know Dave likes that.
So when do we as ratepayers get reimbursed for that?
Yeah, great question. Over time, with the asset that we have, they will pay for that over time. The annexing area will pay for that over time, for sure. I mean, you and I are ratepayers today. I think that's what your question is.
Right. So we're ratepayers today. So if our utility company says, okay, we're going to front the money to bring you in, so you don't have to pay it, that means we're paying it as current ratepayers. And when you say over time, is that because they're paying, when they get hooked up, they're paying it over time? Or, I mean, a developer that eventually develops that property is going to have an electrical impact fee and bond for all the utilities that have to go in there, including electrical. So you're telling me that's not when we ratepayers get reimbursed?
So we ratepayers would get reimbursed over time from the customers that come in, which would be few as far as the rural area that's annexing today. There would be few customers. So in the Annie's Acres, I think there are 3 customers with a total of 4 accounts. Over time, there is a part of the rate goes for O&M, and those new customers, you would get some of that back over time on those new customers. As that development also develops, the ratepayers pay $0 for that new infrastructure, but you have all those new customers that come onto the system and are paying as well. And there's very little O&M needed for the initial few years on those new ratepayers because it's a brand new system in that area, right? So the idea is that when there is some development, it would be that you would get some of that revenue back as well.
So
Yeah.
there are two components, right? So maybe you can just tell me if I'm looking at this the right way or if I have something wrong, but we're required to buy the infrastructure. That's what you're talking about, the assets. But then also there is the lost revenue component. And are we talking here about the city paying for both or splitting that? Because in my view,
I wouldn't. Yeah, I'm not talking about the. It's good to bring that up.
Okay.
I'm not talking about the city paying for the lost revenue. Although we could flip flop it, and I mean we could do that.
Part
as
of
well.
the SESD payment though is lost revenue.
Correct.
Right.
That's one check, that's one calculation.
So just personally, I find it easier to talk to residents about growth from the perspective of the city's not subsidizing growth. And we have impact fees, for example, that make it so that we can look people right in the eyes and say, look at what's happening around, but we're not subsidizing that. Growth pays its own way. And this is a little bit philosophical because I understand that typically we're paying more for the assets than maybe what they're really worth, just kind of given
Because of the
how things are
contractual
set up.
arrangement, yeah.
But at least,
Some depreciation, but that's how we feel.
yeah, so, but at least we would be, as the city, paying for an asset. We would be getting something tangible that you could touch and feel. So in my view, we're not really subsidizing growth. Ratepayers aren't necessarily paying for that on the asset side of things. On another side of the regime that we have with SESD, we're paying for some future lost revenue that they have, and in my view, requiring somebody upon annexation still to fund that. That does make it so that we're not subsidizing.
But is it often that the asset we're purchasing is not in a state that our utility company deems good enough to continue servicing, and so we end up replacing new poles, new wires, new transformers, and the whole bit? I mean that.
But usually we replace it with underground.
So that, I guess that's where I'd be in favor of skipping a step of saying, if somebody's annexing in, it's pretty close. You know, I mean, you're talking a year. Typically, if they're going that far to spend some money and do some studies and bother that many neighbors of theirs to say, hey, are you interested in this? They went a good portion down the road, and it's within a year's time of that they're coming to a financial institution to either say, hey, I got to know where I got to deposit my check because XYZ company wants to buy this property now that we're annexing, or I got to come borrow some money to do the development, and this is, you know, what it is. So it's pretty close to saying, okay, we're going to do some investments. So I would say, yes, for heaven's sakes, don't make them pay. Let's not cover it and say, okay, put more overhead lines in, because when you do 20 lots on this piece, we're going to make you go underground. I'd rather skip that step. But unless it's, I guess I'd want to know how far down the road. And that makes a good point, Dave. I think that answers my question about subsidizing, because you are getting an asset for it. But that contract is pretty good on one side where we're overpaying for an asset.
Yeah, every situation's different, but a lot of times I see the frustration in the fact that over the last 10 years, it's been very difficult to get those numbers from SESD. So everyone's waiting a long time, and then it never comes. And so this keeps it between us and SESD, and they can go on, I think.
Are they the only entity that we would, or is there any Rocky Mountain Power in our?
Eventually, we'll have some Rocky Mountain Power.
We had a little bit over at Wasatch Pallet with Rocky Mountain
Okay.
Power, but it seemed to work out a lot easier. They responded to our emails.
Couple thoughts I have is, Gal yesterday ran into one of our most recent annexers. Is that a word? You know? And, well, this sucks. great timing, guys. Now you're going to do this, right? We didn't have to do this, or, you know. And so, yeah, there's maybe some of that. Jeez, you guys just made this new rule, and we didn't have to pay it. Or my farm has a lot more line on it than his farm, and is just one hookup to his house, and we both annex in. And like you used an example of different amounts of money. What were your discussions in that of the fairness of? There's no fairness. The mayor says we don't believe in that.
So we have allowed for connectors agreements so that as developers come in, they reimburse whoever fronted that in the past, so that it would be fair. But this, of course, that's a non-issue if we handle it.
Did away.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that,
I think it's a good thing all the way around.
and then Kent.
And then Kent comes.
Money guy.
We can paint the other side of the picture.
And you need to recite what Dave was talking about earlier.
Which was that?
I can't tell you.
Oh. No, I just want to, as a perspective, back when we started to charge it, just the thought process back in those days when we had this. Sometimes we think that we are putting this burden on the farmer that lives there. And in reality, the farmer's selling the whole piece of property to the developer, and as part of their cost of development, I mean, they got to get water shares, they got to get ditch covered, they got to do all these other things, and as part of that cost of developing to that developer, it's buying out the annexation or the cost of that annexation. So you're really putting that cost that's going to be now burdened by the city back to the developer who's really causing that to take place. And so it's a real cost. Saying that sometimes it is the one house that's there, but most of the time that property is being purchased by a developer who's a bigger developer in the scheme of it, and that's just part of his cost of development, which he should bear as part of his cost of development. And so I'm not all the way for saying the city buy it. I think some of it is the developers as part of their expenses that's there. So that's another side of it.
Thank you for the other side.
Is that before or against?
Hello from the other side.
These. All right. So what do you? We're just doing a discussion.
Yeah. So and I mean today the policy is the annexing company pays for the assets and they pay for the lost profits. As far as the SESD contract, it's not that way with Rocky Mountain. Just zoom out so I can see more of the town. Maybe to a little bit more. Go up a little bit more. Zoom up into space.
Okay.
I want to see more town. There you go. We have areas of town that annex and then have nothing that happens for a long time. I can't think of the name out here, but I want to say there was an Amelia Earhart-ish annexation that they are at here. Where was Devaney? Was that out there also?
Devaney's 1,000 north, 500 west.
Around the airport as well. Those annexations came in and around the airport area, and we won't see any development out there for a long time. So there are some annexations that are not for development. Everything on the East Bench as it came in, these annexations right here were almost immediately turned over for development. And so you have both of them that come in, and you can't ever really tell.
Most part, when they annex their development, their dream is to develop.
That's the What's the other purpose?
We want the property.
Hook me up and don't annex me?
Yeah,
No, because we have that
why
too.
do you have all these areas annexed into Spanish Fork City today where they aren't developed?
Water.
But both of the
Right?
two.
They could want water. That's actually a big one for them.
Yeah, it is right now. It's huge.
And I apologize, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think both the Devaney and the Amelia Earhart annexations were ours.
To expand runway, maybe?
One was to
Yeah.
expand the runway, and the other's because it's the best industrial property to develop in the city. So we wanted them in the city. So I don't know if that
Yeah.
changes.
Right.
So we go today that an annexing group pays the whole amount. And you're gonna get to sit, we want to sit.
You're gonna
I am, right? The annexing group pays for it all. And what I've kind of proposed is that the city consider paying the facilities purchase part of that, not any of the lost profit. We can pay half of it. We can pay a quarter of it. We can pay 3/4 of it. We can pay zero, like we haven't. It's our policy. We can do whatever we want, and there are good reasons for all of it. And I don't believe our history is wrong, and I don't believe that a change is wrong. As just we've delved into this topic more and more, it seems like there are good reasons to consider a change there.
And maybe there could be some kind of a timeline if we're, if like you said, they immediately annexed in, we could say, well, if that's your plan in the next year, but if they're just moving it to get to the city, water is a huge reason. I mean, most of Leland up there, his well's going dry.
I get uncomfortable treating an annexation differently because you are a developer or you are still a farmer. That gets a little bit awkward. And as soon as you do something like that, I think people will create a smarter way to get around it, right? And I don't want to make people feel like they have to lie. So.
I think it's good discussion. I think what I'm hearing is the majority would like to see a change.
Okay.
So maybe come back to us with something.
With some draft, and we'll use some numbers
let's
and
look
percentages or whatever, and you can massage it from there.
Perfect.
All right, we can do that. Okay, thank you.
All righty, thanks.
I move we go into closed session for reasonably imminent litigation and land transaction.
Second.
Got a motion by Councilman Gordon, and a second by Councilman Argyle. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right.
You said that so well.
Practice.
I couldn't say it.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen.